Hi, everybody. I'm Dave.
I'm John.
And this is the Coffee and Capes podcast, where we are a couple of enthusiasts who like coffee and love geek culture.
It's true. It's always true. It's been true for this is 11th episode.
It's been true for a lot longer than 11 episodes.
Yeah, I mean, it's true. It's definitely.
It's only been a podcast for 11 episodes.
Yeah, it's only been a podcast for 11 episodes, but this has been our life for a long time.
It really has. It really has.
Yeah.
Well, you are listening or watching us, so you have found us on some level or in some medium. But John, let's hear the rundown. Where are all the places that people can find us and connect with us?
Yeah, we are located all over the interwebs and in your phone. You can find our podcast on YouTube if you're watching us on YouTube, right? Probably the main reason you would watch us on YouTube is we always choose these different backgrounds that are kind of hints towards what the topic is.
And because we're very, very handsome.
I don't know about that. I was actually thinking my forehead looks huge.
Yeah, me. Why do you think I'm wearing a hat so that the light doesn't glare off of my bald head?
Yeah, I should have worn a hat today. I don't know why I didn't. So we're on YouTube. Obviously, you can find us on social media. Instagram, coffee _ the letter N _ the word capes. You can find us on Twitter, coffee and capes, coffee _ N _ capes. Facebook, just coffee and capes. So we're kind of all over on the social media channels. You can find us there. And then as far as to be able to listen to us, we're everywhere. We are on iTunes. We're on Spotify, as I informed my amazing Harry Potter loving daughter, Delilah, last night that she could find her nerdy old dad on Spotify. So Delilah, if you are listening to this, I love you. And then also on Google Podcasts, Stitcher, and a number of others. So we're out there. Tell your friends, please. Tell people that like coffee. Tell people that like geek culture. And of course, as always, if you have thoughts, you have ideas, you have comments on anything that we have talked about or anything you'd like to see us talk about, please leave us comments, or you can send us an email at supers@coffee, the letter N, the word capes.com. And don't be afraid to send us an email. We will absolutely respond. And you never know, like your topic could become a future podcast. As today's is actually stems from a couple people talking to us about, geek culture.
Yeah. Before we get into that, can I share with you can we brag for just a second? And let me share, you just talked to your daughter about this. So my niece sent this note this week after we talked about our podcast at Thanksgiving. And she said, I want to tell you, I started your podcast. It's really interesting. Smiley face. I'm currently on the first one, but I will definitely continue to listen. And this is my favorite part. It made me laugh multiple times. LOL.
Hey, aww. Look at that.
Thanks,
we made our
Layla.
family
That's
laugh.
The best. Yeah. And see, now I have proof forever. It's on the internet that somebody said I'm funny. My life is complete.
Well, we always thought we were funny.
Well, sure.
We laugh at ourselves a lot. And it's really important to understand is we laugh at ourselves.
Yes.
Before we jump into today's episode, though, as always, Dave, what are you drinking today?
I am enjoying some bomb beans from our friends at Ladybird Provisions. Some coffee bomb beans that are clean and mild-bodied with chocolate, citrus, and nutty.
Ooh, very nice. How do you like it?
Tasty. It's tasty. Yeah, I like it. I'm always a little bit weary of coffee that purports to be chocolatey because sometimes it can have a little funky flavor, I think. It gets a little too sweet, but this is not. This is very tasty.
Nice. I am drinking, I don't have the bag with me, but Blackbeard's Delight by Black Rifle Coffee Company, veteran owned and supported. Hands down, Blackbeard's Delight, one of my all-time favorite coffees. It is a really nice, smooth dark roast. I don't, like I said, I don't have the bag here to give you all the important details, but it does make you feel like you could rule the 7 seas after a couple of cups. And then of course, inside of my coffee, I have Happy Cacao Ladybird Provisions coffee bomb. So again, thanks to Nicole and Sarah for sending out those care packages. We're still enjoying them. And if you guys haven't checked out Ladybird Provisions and you're coffee fans, please do so. They're a small business out of Austin, Texas, and their product actually is phenomenal. And I've enjoyed it for a while. Dave now enjoys it. Rachel, my amazing partner in life and wife, she enjoys it. So take a look, and you can find them at Sprouts. I think out in your neck of the woods, Dave, you can find them at Mariano's.
Okay.
At least that's where you used to be able to find them. So,
we'll check that out.
Yeah. Or you can order it online. They have dry bombs that they'll send you online.
You can order things online now?
I hear it's a thing. Okay.
I might have to look into that.
Yeah. Foreshadow. Yes. All right, Dave, what are we talking about today?
Well, we've been throwing around this term geek culture quite a bit. And a few people, including most notably my wife, is always like, what do you mean by that? Like, I'm not sure it means what you think it means. Because, you and I, I'm sure we have an idea of what we mean when we say that. But like a lot of things, I suppose the term could mean a lot of different things to a lot of different people. So we're going to take a stab at a wide variety of geek culture, including some of the areas where maybe you and I aren't as versed, and see where we end up. So we're just gonna have a free-flowing conversation, I think, today, and see where we end up, and that's why we're at least tentatively calling this All the Geeks.
Yes, and and thanks to Joanne for bringing it up as a topic, because it's also a topic that my friend Adam, shout out to Adam, brought up, and he's a follower of the podcast, and he follows us on social media. I appreciate that he actually leaves us comments. It's very, that's awesome. But he too, he brought up and asked, he's like, hey, love the podcast. Are you guys going to talk about some of these other avenues? And, so Adam, you partially inspired today's podcast. So thanks for bringing it up in conversation. Adam. Yeah. So you guys, if you're watching us, you can see we have different backgrounds. A lot of times it's just Marvel or DC. But let's let Dave start by talking about, maybe we talk about like, what are some of the different recognizable that we recognize as being geek culture?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, for you and I, we tend to focus on comic books and movies related to comic books. I've got my Star Wars shirt on because, that's another big one, of course, for me. And maybe, I was trying to think. So if Star Wars came out in 1977, I would have been like 5 that summer. And so that might very well be the first real experience of geek culture that I had. And I still remember going to the Ben Franklin store and getting my first action figure, those first original action figures of the Star Wars guys. And so Star Wars has been there for 45 years of my life or something. So that's that we haven't talked much on I don't think we've done episodes much with Star Wars. We've touched on it a little bit, but we haven't done a Star Wars focused episode, which those are probably coming.
Yeah.
Teaser.
Yeah, there's a lot coming out, and we've kind of focused on like what has happened recently.
Yeah. Right.
So we talked about, like things that are fairly relevant to kind of what's going on, like last week's, or not last week. By the way, happy late Thanksgiving holidays to everybody. We didn't release anything last week because we were off with families doing stuff. But the last one we did was the second volume of Famous Faces, Different Franchise, or Famous Franchises, Different Faces.
There you go.
Right. That covered Spider-Man, which is relevant because Spider-Man No Way Home is coming out. Prior to that, we had our Eternals review, we had our Dune review, we had we had some we had our one that covered Batman and the Joker with, you know,
Mhm.
the upcoming Batman movie coming out with Robert Pattinson. I keep wanting to call him Twilight Boy, but I feel it's just not right anymore.
No, that's not really fair.
We got to do something else. So we've done, and like we have been focused heavily on Marvel and DC, and you know,
And I'll say that's for me, that's where I'm most well versed. That's probably where I'm likely to focus.
Right.
However, you know, obviously there's lots of different avenues that you can take and be part of this geek culture thing. Dungeons and Dragons, D&D is one. Like I remember playing that game, first learning about that game when I was in like 4th grade or something, and bringing the books to school and being able like that's what I would read on my, like we had reading time. Like I'd bring that out and read, and we'd try to like if we had indoor recess or something, we'd try to play, a couple of us, and I'm sure we were bad at it, but we had fun.
Right. You had to write. I remember I played Dungeons and Dragons as well. I had like the whole collection. I had to hide them from my mom. She didn't think they were something I should be playing, because if you're our age, right, back when those kind of started to really gain a little bit of popularity, there was this whole idea that maybe they were part of some cult.
Yeah.
Right. Which, you know, it's just demonstrative of like the ignorance of like people at a certain time and era. But back then you had to write up your own character sheets. Like you didn't have access to like copy machines in your house or printers. So I remember like hand drawing out everything in my poor young kid scrawl.
Yeah, absolutely. Or I really enjoyed creating the dungeons or like the maps of stuff. Like I had a ton of those the graph paper. I remember I would try to create stuff, and I remember for a while my folks said, "Oh, maybe he'll grow up to, maybe young Dave will grow up to be an architect because he likes to design all these buildings and stuff." Spoiler alert, I did not become an architect.
No, he didn't. But you know, like Dungeons and Dragons was kind of, it sounds like it was yours, and I know that it was mine. My first introduction into role-playing games. I found through, and I think back then, if I think about it, I found role-playing games through 2 avenues, right? One being like a bookstore, and they'd have like a small section of those. Now any surviving bookstores have probably larger sections dedicated to like graphic novels and role-playing games,
right?
Or your comic book store, right? They didn't really have back then yet dedicated like gamer stores like they do now,
right?
Which is cool. Like I've been into some in the last few years, and they're super cool, and there's tons of games out. But I remember I played with friends in high school. Like we played Battletech, and there were superhero ones, and then there were so many different.
I remember there was like a 1920s like gangster one. I remember having characters with like that were, you know, I don't know if they were U.S. Marshals or cops or whatever with the Tommy guns, and then you had the gangsters with their, you know, it was all.
I remember playing.
I don't remember what that was called, but
I don't know that one. There was a Star Wars one.
Okay.
I played the Star Wars one like pretty consistently. I played Cyberpunk. Battletech was cool because you had the little figurines and you could paint like the little figurines to do whatever. That was probably one of my favorites.
And then like the wide variety of dice with D&D, right?
Those were
the
cool.
Regular, and then the 8-sided and the whatever, and the 20-sided, and
you could get clear or solid.
Yeah, right.
Swirls, you know, like that. And as we're talking about it, like you can see both of us like enjoying the idea of like these different little nuances for all this stuff. And you know, as I would refer to it for myself anyway, just kind of geeking out on like the different pieces that you could use with this.
So how would we define geek culture? Is that like, is geek culture something about which you can geek out? Because that's pretty broad. That doesn't.
I think geek culture, though, you know, we've talked about it, and I think a lot of it, and this is a little different because Marvel and DC and Star Wars, I think Star Wars has always been a little bit more mainstream, right? Marvel and DC really haven't become what I would consider mainstream accepted until like the movies started to roll out.
Right.
DC even, Superman was always very iconic.
Yeah.
Right. Then we got Batman movies, and that elevated Batman considerably. And then George Clooney almost killed him off. Sorry, George Clooney. It wasn't your fault. We've talked about this in a past episode. We don't blame you. You just are the easiest to pick on.
Right.
But then that almost, and then Marvel, made a few random attempts to try and launch, and really Marvel's movie line launched with, I would say the most successful launch was Blade with Wesley Snipes. And a lot of people forget that was right where it originally took off from. And then you got Iron Man, and then we had Fantastic Four.
Well, and X-Men came in around like 2000. So
yeah, X-Men as well. We had X-Men, which that'll be a long different discussion.
Right.
But so, the movies helped, I think, elevate comics into more of a mainstream thing.
Yes.
But prior to that, it wasn't.
No, not at all.
And
it was something you're supposed to be ashamed of, that you sort of
right.
That you cared about or enjoyed.
Yeah, you had the Flash Thompsons of the world who picked on you if you had comic books, or you weren't. If you were a guy, you weren't ever gonna have a girlfriend in high school if you opened up your backpack and there was a D&D book and then some X-Men comics and some dice and whatever else.
Yeah.
And you were considered, I don't know that outcast is the right word, right? But you definitely weren't what I would say is mainstream.
Yeah, I agree.
Right. Even if, and I want to say this, even if you were like into sports, like you sat a little differently.
Yeah, it is interesting how sports was okay. And now when I look at it, like, that's just as much of a geeky culture. I wouldn't include sports in our definition of geek culture, but it is a culture of geeks. Like, it's just like,
it's obsessive.
It is obsessive. I mean, there's a reason fans comes from the word fanatic, right? That people are fanatic about their sports, and we've seen how destructive that can be. Like, especially after, say, the stuff with Penn State and then Michigan State and Ohio State and on and on and on, Baylor, like all the terrible stuff that that sports fandom can bring out the worst in people. And so I'm not sure it's deserving of the, you're okay if you're in sports. Well, I mean, that's fine to be a sports fan, but don't pretend like that's somehow like a higher, better subculture than geek culture stuff. Than,
I was thinking about this morning, and I don't know, we're both a little older, so we'll, some people will understand this reference and some people will, they're going to have to look it up. But I was thinking about this morning, and I immediately thought about Ogre and Revenge of the Nerds. Right. And Revenge of the Nerds came out, and really like that kind of painted the picture of like what that era viewed gamers as, what that era viewed like comic book enthusiasts as, what that era viewed like if you dressed up in a costume to do anything other than play sports, right, or sports related, you were kind of this nerd. Like, you were a nerd, you were a geek. Like, and I think geek and nerd are very interchangeable in my mind, and it may not be for everybody, but it is in mine. So but I think about like Ogre, nerds, and how they painted that, and it made it okay to be a jock. It made it okay to like obsess about sports and be a fanatic about sports, and not right. It wasn't for these other things. Right. It wasn't okay to be intellectually and imaginatively, that's a word I'm making it up. But intellectually and imagination, like stimulated through these different artistic mediums, and make no mistake about it, they were artistic mediums. They weren't classic, like like Picasso or Rembrandt, right? But hands down, look at some of like the artwork that you see in comic books. Look at the writing and the level of creativity that existed to create things like Dungeons and Dragons,
right?
And it's not an Isaac Asimov novel, but and to that point, like that still would fall into like geek culture, like
those
traditional
science
like,
fiction as a genre essentially is.
And there's extremes to it, right? So like Star Wars was a little bit more mainstream and everybody liked Star Wars. Star Trek, right?
Yeah, which we haven't talked about basically at all, but that's been a big part of my fandom as well.
For sure, right? And that evolved. Like you got people who were super into it, right? Super into it. And they dressed up as like, they put Spock ears on and went to conventions, and people like that, that was considered like, and still probably is to like a segment of the population, considered to be very geeky, very like not mainstream accepted, right? Weird. And I think that's what, at least for me, the hope is that through like these conversations, like maybe it becomes like a little bit more normalized. Like people don't look at it and go, oh, that's really weird.
Yeah. Like as long as you're not hurting yourself or hurting somebody else, like what you like.
Yeah, totally. Like live action role playing. Now that got a chuckle, right? Because I think the acronym LARPing sounds funny, right?
Yeah. But and I'm chuckling because it just showed up in episode 2 of the new Hawkeye series,
right? Which is kind of why it came up for me too. But I mean, that's very much like, that's something that's been around for a long time.
Yeah, but in that episode, Hawkeye's kind of looking down on those folks,
right? A little bit, but then he starts like doing it, right? And it's a different story. And he's like, but he's also trying to get to the end.
He's got a goal, and he's like,
he's got a goal, and it's not something that like, he has the time to afford to be into and be appreciative of, and
well, and there's a great line. The one guy's like, you get to be a superhero every day. This is the closest I ever come to it.
Right. Yeah. And it's really accurate, I think, for a lot of people, right? There's a reason people like cosplay has become so big within like geek culture, because it gives people an opportunity to dress up as their favorite superhero and walk around and feel really cool.
Right.
I think it's cool.
I agree. And there's a reason these stories connect with folks. And that's probably as many different reasons as there are people, but there's something about all these avenues that really touches people, and that that maybe folks are looking to be part of a story larger than themselves, looking for a community, looking for just some way to liven up what for a lot of folks can be a mundane existence, whatever it is. Like geek culture can help you deal with your crap in that way. It can be an escape. It can be an avenue to an outlet for creativity. It
can just be fun.
Yes. Oh my goodness.
Right. I mean, and it's generational is the cool thing about it. It's so generational. Like I brought up my daughter at the beginning, and she's been into Harry Potter forever.
Okay.
Right. And you think about what Harry Potter inspired, Harry Potter inspired a whole new generation of people who believe in like magic and just found it fascinating and incredible. And, they dress up in the robes and they collect the wands, and you see them like doing these things, and man, it's so cool to see a new generation like grab onto something like that. Yeah. And kind of make that their own, and even like older generations did as well, right? It resonates with something that just brings them joy, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's kind of one of the things that I love about geek culture is its wide varietal of things that it encompasses.
Yeah.
That would probably be considered not mainstream, right? And Harry Potter is probably pretty close to mainstream, right? Because of the great success that it had.
Yeah.
The dressing up, the wand collecting, those things, not as much mainstream, right? But that's that level of joy that it just brings people. And there's so much of this, like there's so much that does that, right? Anime, like I have behind me, right? That's a whole nother version of animation. It's been around for a really long time. It's Japanese comic books. It's and they've been going forever and ever and ever and ever. And it's had a cult like following for so long. And there's so many amazing and cool storylines, and it skews a little bit more adult in a lot of times. It definitely has a wider range, but that's one. I mean, my wife and I, we watch anime cartoons on the weekends. The animation is beautiful. It's absolutely incredible. The one behind me is One Punch Man. He's funny. Love him. He's hilarious.
Well, and I'm like looking at I'm not familiar with the anime. I know of it, but I haven't really watched any, so I have very, very little exposure to it. But just, reacting to what I see on your screen, like this, the detail in the drawing is amazing. There's intensity and ferocity and power, but also beauty, I think, is there. Like
yeah I would say that's an accurate statement.
A little bit of androgyny, which maybe is, obviously One Punch Man, but I guess his name, but there's something about the way that's drawn that I feel like it's got a little bit of androgynous feel to it that can maybe be an avenue for inclusion for folks.
Yeah, I would say so. And I think that like probably anime has a long history of fighting for inclusion as well. Right. Just like Marvel and DC have.
Yeah.
And honestly, D&D, right? D&D gave you the ability, you can choose the gender that you want to be.
Yeah.
Like you can choose the race that you want to be. You can choose the class that you want to be. And it's all in your imagination. Like, it's not like, oh, hey, you're a straight white male, so you have to identify and play as a straight white male in the game.
Yeah.
It's like, no, man, you want to be a dark elf, chaotic, evil female character? Get it. Like, get it. You want to talk in a high voice like this to like when you're role playing to really like get into the character? Of course, you do it.
Yeah.
Like and I think that's one of the beautiful things that like geek culture provides is your ability to identify like and be whatever you want. Like One Punch Man is bald. Like, how many bald superhero characters do you get to like come across? And he essentially looks like he's wearing a giant yellow pajama suit. And the androgynous aspect of it, literally anybody could dress up as that.
Yeah.
Right. For cosplay, anybody. And I think that's really cool. I think that you find, and now that I talked about it, and I'll shut up in a second because I think I talk too much. But now that I think about it, right, that ability to choose gender, race, ethnicity, what have you, right, in role playing also extends into video games.
I was wondering if we were going to get to video games. I had that on my list of things to talk about. Yeah, for sure. Recently I was visiting a friend in Houston, and we went to like this old school arcade place, like the type of place, you pay a cover fee and you can play all the games for as long as you're going to be there.
So good.
Yeah. Which means a lot of them are, games from the 80s when we were kids and playing video games in an arcade. And one of them, gosh dang it, I cannot think of the name of the game, but it's basically it's patterned after D&D, where you can be like a magician, or you can be I think it might have been, maybe it was
Gauntlet.
Yeah. And when we were scrolling through, like, who are we gonna be, and I think I ended up being a elf, and my friend was like the female thief or something, like, but that just what you're talking about, that like there's I mean, I don't think we were doing it in a way to, well, let's experience what it's like to be
right,
but it's just, but it does, like, it doesn't matter, like, every character has its strengths and weaknesses. Like, it's not it might be a way, geek culture in that sense might be a way to help break down some of the barriers that we see, where we're like, oh my gosh, anybody that's different than me must be something, wrong, bad, evil, some version of that. No, like, you can be a wide variety of types of beings and be good.
Right. Yeah. And and you see that now in I think in today's console games, right? Like Xbox, PlayStation,
Yeah.
what have you, World of Warcraft, if you play World of Warcraft, which I did and had a lot of fun with, but you can make whatever character you want. And I think one of the things that you see in doing so is you can make a female character, and it's not you're not penalized in it being weaker than, you know what I mean? Like, you're not like,
Right.
oh, you chose a girl in armor, so you can't hit as strong, or you can't do this.
Right. I do think it's incumbent upon us to say at this point, like, I think it's getting better, but still most game creators are straight men. And so the female characters tend to be created with a, from what they call the male gaze, right? That they tend to be exaggerated physically or scantily clad in the female characters. Like, there's still a lot of that happens, which isn't, isn't the best, but and the whole Gamergate from a few years ago, that like, oh my gosh, the scandalous idea that some women might have opinions about, and informed opinions about games, about video games, and the really horrible way that some of those women were treated. Like, that stuff, that's part of geek culture too. Unfortunately, that's sort of the shadow side of geek culture, that it as much as I think the product wants to be and needs to be and is inclusive, and we've said this before, that geek culture should be a place where everybody belongs.
Yeah.
But I think it's just important too to say that hasn't always been the case. We haven't lived up. We geek culture folks haven't lived up to that ideal all the time.
Yeah, I would agree with that, and I think that comes through not only in how women are created in video games and in comic books, for that matter.
Yeah, absolutely.
But also, it's like, if you take a look at like male characters, how realistic is it?
Right.
Everybody's
got not just 6-pack, but somehow like a 12-pack of abs. Like,
right. Like, they're super jacked, they're super strong. Like, they can do, like, they just like perfect physique. And it's like that. And so to that point, though, I think that just stems from, what's an ideal looking superhero, right? Somebody that looks like Superman came along and put forth, this is what that looks like. Now, I think one of the things that is really nice about some of the movies is that while you get these absolutely beautiful human beings that are portraying these characters, they're not always super jacked, right? They're not always like, they don't have like tons of muscles. And sometimes, you know, Hollywood does the thing with like padding the suit a little bit and sometimes a lot of bit, Shazam. But
right.
you know, they can't all be Jason Momoa, I guess.
Yeah.
You know, but like Gal Gadot, she's a beautiful woman, like absolutely beautiful. If you take her physique and you put it up against like the, let's say 1980s, 1990s, like female superhero drawn characters, she's not as built as some of those, right?
Right.
But she easily like carries that powerful persona.
Yes.
Right. Which is what matters. And at the end of the day, like
Agreed.
that she carries herself and is able to embody that persona. And she does such a magnificent job of it.
Yeah.
Right. She does an absolutely magnificent job of it.
Agreed. What are some other aspects? So we've got, we said D&D, we talked a little bit about anime, just
collectibles,
video games. Okay. Oh, right? Sure.
Like collectibles. I have a small collection of like Funko Pop characters that I only got into because of at the CrossFit gym. I put all the Avengers ones up on the counter because it had been named CrossFit Loki at one point. Right. So they had left the Loki Funko Pop there, but I started a small collection of those, and they're fun. Like you can get them from anything. Like I have Star Wars ones, I have My Hero Academia ones, I have, you know, Avengers ones, and they create them across different eras and, you know, different timelines, and some of them you look at and you're like, man, all right. But I mean, that's a collectible. And then you've got all those action figure collectibles too, like you were talking about, even going back to like the 1977 Star Wars ones.
Oh my gosh, all those. And
with the slide out lightsabers.
Yes, the slide out lightsabers and the like little like vinyl little cape thing. Even on characters that didn't wear a cloak or a cape. I don't know why that was, but it worked, right? It was great. And I had a lot of those.
Same.
And a lot of the toys, and it's what we played with. My friends and I that's what we played with.
Transformers.
I don't think I ever really had Transformer toys.
I did.
Okay.
Probably until I was like 13 or 14 too. I'm not gonna lie.
Yeah. Oh, I definitely played with like the action figures and the superhero action figures into junior high age for sure.
Yeah. And it's okay. You know, I mean, you get into like that point of life. And I think, you know, there's this expectation you're supposed to develop other interests, you know, and I think there's a societal push there that's like, well, now you should be transitioning out of playing with these things and moving into something else.
And maybe you've just touched on an important point there, that part of what's changed about geek culture since we were that age is that it's not seen as, oh, that's just for kids. Oh, that's just that's childish. Like you need to put that away and move on to grown up important things like sports. Like, no, you don't. Sports are just as dumb as anything else. Like as much as I've got my Sox hat on, I love baseball, I love watching, but you know, I'm not trying to come down on sports exactly, but just that the way that's been lifted up as that's normal and okay, and these other things aren't. I like that that's changing.
Yeah, and you know that brings up a really good point. Like people in both like sports fans and in geek culture, like get very into the things that they're into, right?
For sure.
I think geek culture is more encompassing, and it has a wider range of interests, but you can like all of them. Like you don't have to be just a comic book fan or just a gamer or just into video games or just into collectibles. Like they can all tie together, and they often do, right? They often do.
For sure.
Whereas in sports, like being a White Sox fan and a Cubs fan probably be bad, right? You're already shaking your head, right?
Like nobody around here actually believes that anybody can like both teams.
Right.
There are people that say that, and everybody's like, no, you don't really mean that.
You don't mean that, right? You can't possibly. It's like being a Bears fan and a Packers fan.
Yeah.
Like that's not gonna happen. But here's the interesting thing, right? So you remember Josh and Danielle from the wedding. Like,
yeah.
Right. Love Josh and Danielle. If they find this podcast, hey guys. But when Rachel and I would go to their house for dinner, man, they had just beautiful like collectibles everywhere, like just amazing, like artwork and figures and video games, and it was always so great to go over to their house and see what they had. And that should be as normalized as walking into somebody's house that's, say, like an avid White Sox fan and seeing White Sox collectible stuff everywhere. Right. But for some reason, for a long time, society said collecting sports memorabilia and having that around was okay. And,
and especially for guys, manly.
Yeah. And for guys, manly. And then on the other side, you were like this weird geeky outcast, like,
yeah. And somehow there's always this insinuation of, well, it's a little effete or it's a little effeminate, and therefore somehow not as worthy. Right.
It was like, if you were, and I think this is an interesting thing, you just touched on something, right? If you were, let's say, just physically active.
Yeah.
Right. If you were physically active, like you lift weights, you play sports, you do those kinds of things, and you were like into comic books and into video games and into playing D&D and those kinds of things, man, you were even weirder.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
You were like the weirdest of the weird. They're like, I don't get it, man. You can come hang out with us and play sports anytime. Why would you go and do the other thing?
Yeah. And don't talk about the other thing while you're with us.
Yeah.
And it went the other way sometimes too, like, right. Yeah. And this is a little stereotypical, I suppose, but, oh, those dumb jocks, we can't really, why would you want to hang out with them? I mean, now we're creating an episode of like High School Musical, the musical.
Right. Yeah. But I mean, it's still like, even now, like, and I'll use myself as an example. Like, Dave, we met through CrossFit. Right. Yeah. And so I love lifting weights. Like, I love exercising. I go watch the CrossFit games, and I'm 100% a nerd and a geek over those kinds of things as well. And very passionate about it. And there are times where I walk into like a gamer store or a comic book store, and the kid behind the counter will look at me and kind of give me that, what are you doing here? Kind of look, until I start having the conversation about like, hey, I'm looking for this. And they're like, oh yeah. And then they get excited, right? They're excited. And I don't think that they're judging me. I think it stems from a lifetime of being judged.
Yeah.
Right. By people who are less accepting or less understanding of that culture. And it's justifiably so. I mean, really it is, like, and that's sad.
Yeah.
Right.
I'd like to think it's changing. I hope it's changing.
I think it because things have started to become more mainstream, right? Like video games are now a sport.
Oh, true. Yeah.
Right. You have the e-games, and that's just crazy. One of the guys I work with is a big time video game guy, and we were having a conversation about marketing to that community. And in conversation with him, I was like, whoa, like there's all kinds of stuff for this. Like, there's channels that you can watch people play video games on.
Yes. Yeah.
Right. And
I don't understand it, but I'm glad it's there for the people that want it.
Yeah. Right. Totally. And I think that's, man, such a good, like, what I think
Geek culture at its best is, right? Where we can say, that's not my thing, but I'm glad you have your thing.
Thank you. Yeah, exactly.
And gosh, that shouldn't be so hard. Why is that so hard? Why are so often, at least here in the US, at least mostly among white folks, we're always like, oh, you got to like the thing that I like. And unless you like the thing that I like, then you're not good enough.
Yeah.
Or there's the thing, well, I like this cool new thing. And if too many people start liking the cool new thing, well, then it's not cool anymore.
That actually tends to be a geek culture,
Yeah.
like aspect, right? Like,
Yeah.
Oh, everybody started liking this and it's just not as cool. The only thing that hasn't happened with has been like Marvel. If anything, like it's created an uptick in like people reading comic books, collecting comic books, I think it's boosted the cosplay community tremendously. Like you see, I was looking at images of like Comic-Con, when it does happen, and you have seen progressively more like elaborate, incredible looking costumes, like whether people like understand that community or not, like you gotta give like a nod to the detail and the effort that
100%.
And I want to say this because I think it's important, and I don't care that I don't look like the comic book character physically when I put this on, because in my mind I do.
Yes.
Like I love this that much. Like there's a certain level of confidence and bravery and self-acceptance that goes along with that I think is beautiful.
Absolutely. That's well said. So I don't know, have we come any closer to defining geek culture? I'm not sure. So it's something that you are fanatical about. It's something that brings you joy.
Yeah.
Something that
and I think if we've got to like put some things into that, I think we could say comic books.
Yeah.
I think we can say role-playing games, gamers, right?
Yep.
Anime, collectibles, right? Video games, sci-fi, right? Sci-fi as a genre, as a book genre, I think definitely is something that you see, especially as those sci-fi things are brought to the screen more and more and more.
Yeah.
Right. There's been some amazing ones brought to the screen. So I think, these are the things that oftentimes people think about, like, and it doesn't matter whether, like, in some of these, whether you're reading it or drawing it or programming it or playing it, right? All of that is kind of encompassed in that, right? And I don't know. I think and cosplay falls into that, like dressing up as your favorite character. And so geek culture, yeah, I don't know. Did we define it?
It's not really up to us. Maybe it's not up to us to define.
There you go.
That we're rolling with the best that we know how. And I'm sure going forward, we'll continue to focus mostly on comic book stuff, because that's our wheelhouse, and the TV shows and movies that come out of that. And I'm sure we'll talk some about Star Wars, especially, we got Book of Boba Fett coming up next month.
Oh yeah. Isn't there another season of Mandalorian coming?
I sure hope so. I don't know, but I think
they're filming it now.
I'm sure, at some point we'll probably talk about Star Trek. So
we should.
Yeah, we should. We absolutely should. I don't know that anime or D&D or Funko will be regular features.
I think we can talk about them though.
But but I just want to say, like, hey, we know you're out there and we're glad for you. Those of you that care about those things more than we do.
Totally. And at some point, we've talked about bringing friends into these, right? From time to time, that maybe have a more rooted interest in some of these other things. So I know at some point, like, it'd be cool to bring Adam on, and I know Adam has a massive, used to, I hope he still does, I can't remember, we were talking about it, but a massive Funko Pop collection, and he's got he likes anime, and it'd be cool to have him on. We've got Brian and Nick, who also are heavily into geek culture as well, as we know, right?
Yeah.
And I know
my brother-in-law's still a weekly D&D'er.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's so cool.
Maybe Mario.
Josh.
Yeah. Yep. Bryant and Molly are D&D'ers. Like,
I didn't know Bryant and Molly were D&D'ers.
Yeah.
Hey, shout out to Bryant and Molly.
Yeah, exactly. We love them.
Yeah.
So yeah, we've got a lot of avenues for expanding our podcast here with some guests that can talk about stuff that maybe we're not as deep into or as versed in.
Yeah, and I think that's really it'll be fun to do that, right? Is to expand it. And because one of the things that I think we both are very open to, like, hearing about other people's interests and learning about, the things that we don't have as deep rooted of an interest in, that geek culture encompasses.
Yeah.
And so, and I hope that people that listen to this, if they didn't start out with that interest, right, didn't start out with that curiosity, maybe they're developing that curiosity.
Yeah. So folks, tell us what we missed. What aspects of geek culture did we forget or skip over something? Help us find our blind spots, because I know we have them.
100%. Yeah. Right. Yeah, we absolutely do. And by the way, if anybody on here knows Kevin Smith, if you could put us in contact with Kevin Smith just for fun, that'd be great. Also, I'm going to continue my campaign, though it sounds like some others are now kind of moving to the front of this, but Idris Elba for James Bond.
Yeah, that would be fantastic.
I'm continuing.
He's been named, he was named early on as a possibility.
Henry Golding is now named as a possibility too.
Who's that?
Henry Golding.
Oh, I don't know who that is.
He played Snake Eyes in Snake Eyes. He was in.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So, which would be really cool to see. He's pretty phenomenal as well. He does a really nice job. So yeah, I think what's coming up on the release schedule. We've had 3 episodes of Hawkeye. We'll have to talk about that at some point.
Yeah, I assume we'll do that kind of after the series has concluded.
I think after this, unless something crazy happens and we're like, we got to talk about this now. I do have to say, I love the tracksuit bros from Hawkeye. They're just hilarious.
Yeah. Over the holiday weekend, I went back and read the Matt Fraction run on Hawkeye that the series is taking inspiration from.
Yeah.
That was so good. And it's only 22 episodes, 22 issues.
Yeah.
So it's, it's not super long to catch up on. It's so good.
Yeah, it was a really good run. You know what I'm reading now is the Marvel Now run of Moon Knight, which is in anticipation of Oscar Isaac, like bringing that character to the screen. I'm trying to like gain a little bit more insight and it's really good. I highly recommend it. If you've got Marvel Unlimited app, like you can read anything basically.
Yeah.
And that one's really good. Yeah. So
sweet, everybody. So leave us a comment on Instagram or send us an email or a Facebook thing. We're on there.
Or write it on a piece of paper, fold it into a paper airplane, and see if the wind catches it.
Message in the bottle. I mean,
message in a bottle.
Whatever works. We'd love to hear from you is the point. In whatever way you would like to connect with us, we would love to connect with you and tell us what we missed. Tell us what we got right here. Tell us what else you want to hear us talk about. Yeah, we got our ideas, but we know that the world doesn't just revolve around us.
This is true. Also, we never asked this, but if you have coffee suggestions, like send us your coffee suggestions.
Yes, please.
Well,
what kind of coffee do you like? And if you're not a coffee person, what do you have instead of coffee?
Oh, that's a good one too. Like, yeah, that's really good. That's a good one. Well, Dave,
John, everybody, thanks for listening. Hope you enjoyed this. And insert clever catchphrase to end the thing with here that we haven't come up with yet.
In the meantime, thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everybody. Bye.